my pastors as he was an elder at Candeo for the past couple years, and seriously, guys, you have an incredible leader and pastor and man in Shane, and so it's a privilege that he asked me to teach this morning, and I've felt so loved and shepherded by his prayers, by his theological knowledge as he's kind of formed a lot of Candeo's convictions on things up in Cedar Falls, and so, yeah, I'm really gracious to be here, so thanks for asking me, Shane. But yeah, like you said, I work up in Cedar Falls. I was born in Lincoln, but moved to Cedar Falls when I was really young, so I grew up there, and I started going to Candeo Church, which is the church that I work at, when I went to high school, and now I work for the Salt Company, which is the college ministry of Candeo, and Candeo is really, really passionate about reaching college students and reaching the next generation, because they are incredibly mobile, and after they get reached and equipped in college, they go out all over the world to share the gospel, and so I loved what Candeo was doing with college ministry, and so I actually chose to go to UNI for the sole purpose of wanting to be a part of that church, and God used it in really, really profound ways, and so, yeah, I've been doing that for the past 3 years now, and yeah, I'm really excited to be teaching this morning. If you guys have your Bibles with you, you can open up to Isaiah 44. That's where we're going to be at this morning, and yeah, it's going to be a joy to teach this text. Speaking of joy, though, there's a cycling studio in Cedar Falls called Joy Wheel. How many have been to a cycling class before? Yeah, I hadn't either. All right, not my thing. Was not expecting a big response on that one. But I had some women that I went overseas with. We were on a missions team together that asked me to go with them, and so I was like, sure, why not? I'll try it out. And so I go in. I registered for bike number 4. I'm kind of just warming up, doing my thing, and just as more and more class members come in, it's just woman after woman after woman. I'm like, oh no. And sure enough, there's 30 bikes available, and there's 29 women and Andrew in the front row. The instructor comes in, it's like, hey ladies, are you guys ready? I'm like, yeah, here we are. So I don't know if many of you guys have used exercise bikes before, but most exercise bikes are the one where you can just pedal, and then if you stop, there's no consequences. You know, like the thing in the middle keeps turning, but the pedals don't. Not the case at cycling classes, all right? You get these like special shoes that like you buckle in, and you're like basically glued to the pedals, and you have to slow down the bike yourself. If you were to stop, the pedals were to keep going. And so at one point, we're just like doing this like hill climber thing, and the instructor's like, get it, ladies? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. So I'm getting really tired, and just like force of habit, I just need a break. And so I go to stop, forgetting that the pedals would lurch me forward. And so my knee buckles, I flip over the handlebars, the bike tips over, I'm like bleeding out on the floor, there's screams all around me. But the worst part of the whole story is that only one of my shoes came unbuckled. And so I'm on the ground kicking behind me as I'm like bleeding out, the pedal's still turning. And the instructor stopped class, it was super embarrassing, and I walked out. And so it was just a snowball effect of just like total just downhill. And so if 2020 was like a story in my life, it would be that story. It kind of started off all right, but kind of just went downhill from there. And I know, that's a really funny story, and I'm sure we have a lot of things in 2020 that was kind of like funny to look back on, like who'd think we'd be living through a world pandemic right now? Like, that's insane. But as funny as that is, I know there's probably also a lot of people in here who are actually feeling some real hard effects of this year and everything that's gone on. Whether it's been loved ones getting sick, or job loss, financial insecurity, mental health, there's so many things going on in our world right now that you may be really struggling with, and I get that. In fact, some of you may be wondering, or know people that are wondering, where is God in all of this? 2020 has been one of the craziest years ever. Where is your God? Is he even worthy of our trust and hope, or should we start looking somewhere else right now? Because it seems like he's not worthy of our trust. It seems like he's kind of lost his grip or his handle on this world. Should we be looking for something else right now? And if you guys feel that or know people that feel that, this morning's text is actually perfect for you. Because the Israelites were in the same exact situation that you are. Isaiah was prophetically writing to a group of Israelites that were in the future going to be under Babylonian captivity. And so they were in exile. They were being oppressed and ruled by a different nation that was very just oppressive towards them. And their claim to God in Isaiah 40, verse 27, which kind of sets up our text, is this. It says, "Why do you assert, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my claim is ignored by my God?" They're saying, why is God ignoring us? Doesn't God see what's going on down here? Where are you, God? And I'm sure that they were looking around to the Babylonian idols and the gods that the people who were captivating them were worshiping and wondering, maybe their gods are the right gods. Maybe those gods are the ones I should follow, because my God seems to be nowhere. And here's how God responds to that. You can turn back to Isaiah 44:6. The people questioning, wondering if they should turn to other gods because their God wasn't there. Here is what God says in Isaiah 44:6. This is what the Lord, the King of Israel and its Redeemer, the Lord of armies says. He says, I am the first and the last. There is no God but me. And so the first thing he says is God's authority, his kingship, his role as their Redeemer is completely unchanged by their life circumstances. What he's trying to tell Israel is that regardless of what's going on in your life, I am your God. I did not leave you just because your situations got bad. There is nothing that happens outside of my control and authority. And whatever power or authority you think is over your life, I'm over even that. Even though there's forces above you right now, I am above all of the earth. What a comfort this would have been. Regardless of our life circumstances, our God is our God, and he is present. Look what else. He continues in verse 7. He says this, who like me can announce the future? Let him say so and make a case before me, since I have established an ancient people. Let these gods declare the coming things and what will take place. He goes, who is like me? God asks. Name another thing on this earth or another God that is as good as I am. God's like challenging the people. He said, find one. And how does he tell them to prove that someone's better? Find someone or something that can declare the future like I can. They can't. But our God can, because the craziest thing about this passage and this kind of section in Isaiah, this is one of the most problematic texts for secular historians. They have no idea what to do with the fact that Isaiah wrote this to a people 150 years in the future, and he named King Cyrus as the one that would lead them out of this exile. Historians do all kind of backflips and hurdles and obstacles to try to explain how this may have occurred, even saying maybe Isaiah didn't write that portion, all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, our God calls his shot. Our God determines the future, and what he says always comes through. Our God is a God that knows and a God that controls the history of the world. And that doesn't change no matter what is going on in our lives. But God's not even done responding to this accusation that he's ignoring them yet. Look at verse 8. He says, do not be startled or afraid. Have I not told you and declared it long ago? You are my witnesses. Is there any God but me? There is no other rock. No, I don't know any. God says, you are my witnesses. You have seen me do great things before. And I'm sure what the people would have been understanding in this moment was he was referring them back to the Exodus. Israel had already been in captivity for 400 years in Egypt, but God led them out. And if they would have remembered that our God is faithful in those circumstances, they would have realized that he can totally lead them out now. And so I think what we can take from this is that we need to remember what God has done before we request that he does more. We need to remember what God has done before we ask him to do even more, because here's the thing, God is not withholding anything from you. It is impossible for God to withhold good from you because he gave you the most valuable thing he possibly could have when he sent his son Jesus to die for you. The thing that would have been hardest for him to give up, the most valuable thing he possibly could have had, was his son Jesus, and he didn't even spare that. And so we need to remember what God has done before we ask that he do more. Because if God did nothing else for us, if he didn't answer another prayer request, if he didn't heal another sickness in the world, he would have already done way more than we could have ever asked or imagined, because he took our eternal punishment on the cross. We need to remember what God has done before we request that he does more. And so the first thing God does is he addresses them by telling them who he is. And then he describes what it's like to follow other gods. They say, hey God, you have ignored us, where are you? He says, well, this is who I am. You can go to those other gods. You can look to put your hope and trust in other things, but here's what it's going to be like. Look with me at verse 9. He says, all who make idols are nothing, and what they treasure benefits no one. Their witnesses do not see or know anything, so they will be put to shame. Who makes a god or casts a metal image that benefits no one? Look, all of its worshippers will be put to shame, and the craftsmen are humans. They will all assemble and stand, and they will be startled and put to shame. This is incredibly strong language. God is saying, you can go follow those other gods, but what will it be like? He says, both the people that make idols and the people that worship them are nothing. They have no value. They are worthless. They are totally meaningless. And not only do they have no value, they are an embarrassment to the people that worship them. He's saying the people that worship these false gods, these idols, they should be ashamed. They should be embarrassed that these created things are the things they call God. He's telling his people, other gods aren't just different, they're worthless. They're no gods at all. The gods of this earth, they're not just different than the God that we worship, they're worthless. They are not actually gods. There are no other gods besides the God of the Bible, the God that we worship. And so let's look at how Isaiah continues to show just how ridiculous it would be to idolize and to make idols. Look with me in verse 12. He says this, he says, the iron worker labors over the coals, and he shapes the idol with hammers, and he works it with his strong arm. Also, he grows hungry, and his strength fails. He doesn't drink water and is faint. The woodworker stretches out a measuring line. He outlines it with a stylus, and he shapes it with chisels and outlines it with a compass. He makes it according to a human form, like a beautiful person to dwell in a temple. He cuts down cedars for his use, or takes a cypress or an oak. He lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a laurel, and the rain makes it grow. A person can use it for fuel. He takes some of it and warms himself, and he kindles a fire and bakes bread, and he even makes it into a god and worships it, and makes an idol from it and bows down to it. He burns half of it in a fire, and he roasts his meat on that half. He eats the roast and is satisfied, and he warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. See the blaze." He makes a god or his idol with the rest of it, and he bows down to worship it. He prays to it, "Save me, for you are my God." This is ridiculous. Isaiah, he almost has kind of like a sarcastic or almost like sassy tone here. He's like, look how crazy this is. They are literally making idols out of the same things that we use for everyday life. They are chopping up a log, and half of it goes in the fire, and half of it makes an idol. As Isaiah is kind of describing what this is like, you can almost see him peering into an idol shop and just being hopeless at the gods that they're making. And I can kind of share his feelings or experience because I had the opportunity to go to the country of Malaysia for a summer. Salt Company sends missions teams every summer to go, and one of the things that we went to is we went to a place called the Batu Caves. And what the Batu Caves were is these caves tucked way up in these mountains that there's just like stories and stories and stories of stairs to get to. And at the top of all these stairs is just this cave with a bunch of Hindu gods. A bunch of statues and idols that 2 times a year on these festivals, people would climb these stairs and they would bring sacrifices and they would put these giant metal hooks in their backs and put weight on them and carry them up all of these stairs just to serve their gods, just to beg their mercy and offer sacrifices. And so we climbed these stairs. We didn't put hooks in our back, but we did climb these stairs, and we got up there. And what I saw was the most hopeless, depressing thing ever. It was people who all of their hopes, all of their dreams for salvation were set on these cement statues that the paint was chipping off. In fact, one of them couldn't even be worshipped that day because it was being refurbished. And it's kind of funny, but it's also heartbreaking to think that all of people's lives, their God, their hope is in these things that need to be repainted. In fact, I saw somebody accidentally drop a Diet Coke, and it ran into the base of one of these stands, and the people went and cleaned it up. I'm like, are you kidding me? How ironic. Your God can be taken out by a can of Diet Coke. Like, your God can fit into an iPhone camera picture. What a small, piddly thing to have all of your trust and hope. It is totally ridiculous. I mean, this is literally what they were doing, though. He would split a wood. I've got a log splitter, and so I split wood and make firewood for people. They would split a log, and by no way to distinguish these two. All right, this one's good for fire. First Baptist, this is your God. Actually, he's got a little, I'll just tear that off. That looks a little bit better. This is your God. This one's in the fire, totally different log. This one, just ignore that one. This is your God. Worship him. Bow down. This is your creator. That's ridiculous, right? You literally just saw me cut him. Like, this is no God at all, but that's exactly what they were doing, and he's trying to help them see how ridiculous that is. But guys, do we not do the exact same thing in our own lives when we make idols around the things that we can see? When we take the things in our life, like money and relationships, career, health, whatever it is, and make them the most important, the ultimate thing to us. When we make our lives revolve around, we obsess over things that are not God, are we not doing the same thing? Are we not worshiping and idolizing created things instead of the Creator? We take the good things that God gives us, and we turn them into God things. We take his good gifts like health and relationships, and we make them the ultimate thing, and we put that on the throne of our lives instead of Jesus himself. And I think this is most obvious in a lot of our lives in that we trust Jesus for salvation, but not for satisfaction. We'll check the box, yes, Jesus died for my sins, I'm going to heaven, but my ultimate joy and my ultimate satisfaction, that's found over here. That's found in my family. That's found in my job and my success and whatever. And we separate salvation and satisfaction, and we worship these things for our joy in our heart. And so the question that God has us for today is not if you have rival gods in your heart, but what are they? What logs are you worshiping? What things that are cut and made and formed by our God do you elevate to the point of God? And in case you don't know, I just have a couple of questions that can help you diagnose what are the things my heart idolizes. What do I love more than I love God? The first thing is a quote from a book by Tim Keller called Counterfeit Gods. And it says this, it says, "Your religion is what you do in your solitude." So in other words, the true God of your heart is what your thoughts effortlessly go to when there's nothing else demanding your attention. Now, one or two daydreams are not an indication of idolatry. Ask rather, what do you habitually think about to get joy and comfort in the privacy of your heart? When no one's around, when you have free brain space, what do you think about? Do you think about comfort and relaxation? And if I could just get to the weekend, if I could just get to that next vacation, then I would be happy. If I had more rest and less burden, less stress, then my soul would be satisfied. Or is it a job? Man, if I just had that promotion, if I just would have looked back on a career well spent, then I would be happy. Or is it control? And if I could just control what all my kids and grandkids and sons and daughters do, then I would feel like I'm satisfied. I can control everything in my life. What does your mind go to constantly without any effort? A second question could be, how do you spend your time and money? Jesus tells us where your treasure is, that is where your heart will be also. What can you guys always seem to find room for in your budget? No matter how stressed you are financially, is there always room for entertainment? Or is there always room for splurging on yourself? Or is there always somehow room in the vacation fund? Or whatever it is, what can you always find money for, even if there's not money for other things? Ask the people closest to you, what do you talk about most? What comes out of my mouth? Because out of the overflow of your heart, you will speak. And so what do you talk about most? If you want to find your idols, follow your money. Your money speaks so loud. And lastly, what are you willing to sin to protect? What is so worthy, what is so gripping to you that you are willing to disobey God to have it? And guys, honestly, I have a really embarrassing but true example in my own life that totally exposed an idol of success and approval. And so, like I said, I work for a college ministry called the Salt Company, and at the beginning of every year, we have this big kickoff on Central Campus. We try to get 600-700 students together. There's a big stage and worship, but this year with COVID, that was not the most appropriate thing. The UNI has some regulations, and so we moved our kickoff to our building. And our building, kind of like this one, it sits in a little bit of a neighborhood, and so one of the tasks I was given by my boss, Stephen, who's an incredible boss, was to go around and let all the neighbors know that we're going to be having this event, just so we don't get sound complaints and stuff like that. And so it was on my calendar. I was planning on doing it, but I moved it back a week just because I got busy. And in the next meeting, he asked me in front of the whole staff team if I was able to get that done. And I hadn't done it yet, but I told him that I had. And it was because in that moment, his approval of me and what other people thought about me was way more important than honoring the Lord. It exposed an idol of my heart that I want approval, I want success more than I want to be obedient to Jesus. And I got so convicted I had to call him the next day and confess that I lied to protect my desire to be approved of by him. And so what are you willing to sin to protect? Where do you make compromises in your integrity and your obedience to allow room for sin in your life? More than likely that's an idol. And so all of us have idols in our life, and the crucial part is becoming aware of what they are. Now, most of these things are not bad things, but when they become our gods, they leave us desolate and desperate. It's not bad to be ambitious. It's not bad to have good relationships. It's not bad to even have good approval. Actually, I think Christians should be the hardest workers. And I think Christians should have the most ambition. I think Christians should be the best at managing their money and making wise investments. And all of those things are good. But when those things become ultimate things, when you wrap your hope and trust and heart around the things of this earth, we have replaced them as good things and made them God things, and that is idolatry. That is worshiping the log of finances. That is worshiping the log of relationships. And so I think some observations from the text about idols that are good for us to know and to preach to ourselves is a couple of things. Look with me at verse 13. It says, the woodworker stretches out a measuring line, and he outlines it with a stylus. He shapes it with chisels and outlines it with a compass. He makes it according to human form, like a beautiful person to dwell in a temple. He cuts down cedars for his use, or takes a cypress or an oak, and he lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a laurel, and the rain makes it grow. The first thing we see about idols is idols are not God, they were created by God. Idols are anything made in the image of man. He crafted it. He chiseled it. It's susceptible to decay. Idols are dependent on other things. If you guys think about it, no matter what we worship other than God, whether it's people or relationships or career success, all of that is still under the authority of our God. Even if you put all of your trust and that comes through, it came through because our God said it would. We are worshiping things that are no gods at all. And in verse 14, it even said the rain made it grow. The tree that their idols were created from, our God made the rain to grow those trees. Everything we can worship is dependent on God. And when we choose to worship things, we ignore that they are under the authority of God too. The second thing is we see in verse 12. It says, the iron worker labors over the coals, he shapes the idol with hammers, and he works it with his strong arm. But also, he grows hungry, and his strength fails. He doesn't drink water, and he is he's faint. The second thing we see about idols is they demand things from us. Idols are needy gods. They need things from you, and they demand your worship. Anything that we could worship apart from the God of the Bible is a needy God, and it will exhaust us. If approval of other people or the way you look in other people's eyes is the most important thing to you, you will be exhausted. Overanalyzing every conversation, every interaction. How did that go? How are they thinking about me? Man, I need to do better next time. I need to bolster that up. If it's your job, well, how can I be better? I'm going to stay some extra hours. I'm going to exhaust myself trying to, whatever the idol is, it will exhaust you. Because whatever you put above God, it needs things from you, and we were never meant to bear the burdens of a God. Anything we worship other than God is needy, and it will exhaust you. And the last thing, idols always overpromise and underdeliver. There is nothing that we can look to in our lives that could actually satisfy our souls. The idols in our life promise things like approval or security. And if my bank account just read this number, then I would feel peace. If my relationships were in this state, if there was no tension, if there was no worry, then I would be good. They always promise to deliver, but they never come through. It always leaves us wanting more or feeling empty inside. Idols exhaust, and idols leave you empty. And so what Isaiah is doing here, he isn't shaming the idols worshippers. No, they do that to themselves. They shame themselves when they worship created things, and so do we. No, he isn't preaching to shame them. He's preaching to free them. This isn't meant to be a heavy-handed message where we call out the idols and then just demand that you go worship God. This is actually meant to be a freeing and encouraging one, saying you don't have to anymore. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to please the gods of this world when we have a God who did all that for you. If our idols demand things from us, they overpromise and underdeliver, and they were created by God, our God is the total opposite of all of that. Look with me at verse 21. It says, "Remember these things, Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I formed you, you are my servant. Israel, you will never be forgotten by me. I have swept away your transgressions like a cloud and your sins like a mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. Rejoice, heavens, for the Lord has acted. Shout, depths of the earth. Break out into singing, mountains, forests, and every tree in it, for the Lord has redeemed Jacob and glorifies himself through Israel." Men are the ones who form idols, but God is the one who has formed man. He is the creator God, and like Shane read in Acts 17, there is nothing on earth that exists without him. He does not dwell in human houses built by human hands. He doesn't need any of that. Our God is above it all, and he is in control. Idols won't actually satisfy, but our God can, and he will. And idols demand things for us, but Jesus fulfills demands in our place. While idols will take and take from you, our God gives and gives. Look at what it says in 22. It says, "I have swept away your transgressions like a cloud, and your sins like a mist." In our place, Jesus came to fulfill the demands that we could never fill on our own. None of us could ever satisfy idols, but here's the thing, none of us could ever satisfy God either. We are all sinners and we all fall short, and if we look to our righteousness or our keeping of the law, that won't be good enough either. But the good news is that Jesus came down and lived a perfect life in our place. He was perfectly obedient to God and then died the death that you and I deserve. And so Jesus fulfills the commands of the worship of the Father in our place, and now we get it like that is our own. We don't worship idols because we worship the God who is worthy of our own worship. Jesus came and died in our place. God doesn't need anything from us anymore. We don't need to please God because Jesus has pleased him in our place. We trust in Jesus now. And he will over-promise and over-deliver because he can and he is faithful. The things we look for in idols, whether it's approval or significance, are found only in the person of Jesus. And our worship of idols will not die until they are replaced by the worship of God. Jesus is the only one that can bear the weight of our souls and will come through all of the time. Will you guys pray with me? Jesus, I thank you so much that you don't let us settle for the things of this world. Jesus, that you love us way too much to let us worship the created things. I thank you that you are a creator God that wants a relationship with us, that has created us for communion with you. But Jesus, mostly I thank you that you fulfilled all of the demands of the law in our place. I pray that we would look to you as a people, not just for our salvation, but also for our satisfaction. And that we would identify the things in our lives and hearts that compete with you, and we would run away from those and run towards Jesus. We love you, and we pray this all in your name.